Hi, everyone. What a nice flow we have today. So I'm Dr. Brie Berry. I'm an assistant professor of environment and sustainability at Ursinus College in Pennsylvania. And I should say, because we're an interdisciplinary group, that I am trained as an economic and environmental anthropologist. And I'm not going to talk a lot about methods today, but I draw really heavily on qualitative methods. So I want to tell you a story. And pardon me while I read from my research notes here. So I sit in a darkened room full of hundreds of women. We're at the end of the first day of PoshFest, Poshmark's annual reseller sales conference slash networking event slash party, sitting down for a talk by Kate Sanner, this co-founder and CEO of Benny, a company that is trying to, quote, bring secondhand to people instead of, quote, waiting for people to come to secondhand. She tells the crowd that, quote, we have enough clothing to clothe the next 6 generations of people. And she goes on to say that there's so much awesome inventory out there and so much that is going to landfill. She describes the problem further, noting the tension between inventory and consumption. So there are cheers and claps in the room as she describes the problems with fast fashion and how we need to bring people into resale markets. As Kate finishes speaking, Alison Liness, the director of business development with Poshmark, takes over. She says to Kate that, quote, it's awesome that you're intercepting people and getting them to make a better choice, which is buying from the people in this room. So there are huge cheers, right? People are applauding. We are really happy right now. And so I contextualize this amid calls for increased scale of secondhand consumption. So Adam Minter writes in his book, Secondhand, Travels in the New Global Garage Sale, that global reuse of materials is, quote, a trade that should be celebrated. It's a guarantee that somebody somewhere values old stuff. From an environmental perspective, it's reuse on an industrial scale. The green economy made real. Okay, we're going to see how this goes. And indeed, reuse has become big business. So before 2000, this is where you could buy stuff online. From 2000 to 2010, we see some growth. And then from 2010 to present, we see an enormous growth in just the sheer number of platforms that you can buy used stuff online. And I'm not just making a connection here myself between circular discourse and these online resale platforms. So they're saying the future of fashion is circular. They're building a culture that's based around circularity. Very much, even the Kardashian closet, where you can buy used clothing from their Kardashian family, is saying they are promoting sustainability. We're creating a circular economy of high-quality items. You're developing a circular closet. And as others have mentioned today, I'm so happy that I don't have to go into this in detail, because I didn't. But we're expecting the U.S. secondhand market to reach enormous heights. And you can see for the green bars on top, that is online resale. So the blue is what ThredUp calls traditional thrift and donation. So we're seeing an enormous projected growth here. So it's something to be looking at. And if we're thinking about scale, and scaling up reuse is something that's good, then we're getting there. We've won. Like, we're on the right track. But I'm an anthropologist, and as anthropologists, we always like to say, like, it's a little bit more complicated than that. So can we go back to the ballroom for a second? So I want to describe what happened next. So if you'll recall, Alison Liness was affirming the idea that shopping secondhand is, quote, the right thing to do, and that platforms like Poshmark are making that possible for a larger scale audience than ever before. So Alison goes on to describe how the future of secondhand is social. And then she begins to describe how brands, quote, brands are stepping in and celebrating their partnership with the secondhand community. She says Coach, in particular, is doing a wonderful job as a partner for resellers by adding QR codes to their items to allow resellers to list them with one click. She then tells the audience that to celebrate this partnership with Coach, everyone at the conference will receive a free new Coach bag. The room erupts into cheers and applause. There are shocked gasps and a collective stampede out the ballroom doors to form a line where we are directed to pick up our bags. And I'm being really good, so I'm going to see if I can actually play this video from someone who was there. I'm going to try.
And at PoshFest, and they announced that everybody's getting a free Coach
Can you hear it okay?
So
Yes.
we're going to go get this bag and see if it's freaking real. Like, this is like insane. We're all like like crazy going to this. Like, what is this Coach bag we are getting? What is like? This is so insane. There's thousands of people here, and they're giving away free Coach bags. That's just crazy.
So the excitement in this room is palpable right
I
now.
hope they don't like run out. I don't like. No, they didn't tell us anything. Everybody is there, and we just are following everybody. This is literally insane. Insane. We have no idea. Like, we're all just standing. Oh my gosh. They're real. Are they really getting bags?
We're really excited about the bags.
Okay, we've been waiting like 20 minutes, but it seems to be like happening. Like, people are walking with free Coach bags. Okay, people are getting two different colors, but they're saying you don't get to pick. You just have to like grab one and go. So I have no idea. I'm almost there. I'm opening it. Nuh-uh. $195. Just gave this away. Are you kidding me? Oh. See this?
Okay, so this, oops. Oh, what if I want to go back though? Yes. Okay, so I won't watch it again, but so this was for me a moment of ethnographic disruption. Yeah. How did we go from cheering and applause around the importance of secondhand markets at scale to this collective stampede towards new Coach bags? What was happening? So if we pair this with session titles at this Posh Fest and others, like Everything You Need to Know About Buying Wholesale on Poshmark, and From Zero to $100,000, How Six-Figure Sellers Use Posh Shows to Scale Their Business, I wondered what precisely was being scaled up. So as I think about scale, Discard Studies scholars Max Lieberone and Josh Lepofsky talk about scale as a way of understanding relationships that matter to defining an issue. And they write that scale is not a continuum. You can't capture relations by slowly zooming in or out. A skin sale does not scale up to become an arm, and an arm cannot be chopped into smaller and smaller pieces until it is a pile of individual undamaged cells. And I think about this in the context of some work that I did on localized reuse economies in rural Maine. And so what you're seeing here is a network map of all the ways that people get and get rid of stuff. If you're like, I can't see anything, just hang with me. Each of these nodes is a point at which someone got or got rid of something used. And right now they're scaled by the size of, like, the economic impact, right? How much money was generated. And you can see that the yellow here is digital exchange platforms. And the light purple is, what am I calling it? National thrift stores. That's Goodwill in our area. When we size it this way, though, or look at it this way, we miss all of these individual connections, right? So every single line here is the movement of an object. And in this case, every time an object moved, we are seeing relationships between people happening, right? And so if we think about relations that matter, I want to think about truly like what is happening on these online resale platforms. So, oh goodness. Yeah, here we go. So I was doing interviews with folks who are selling online, and a reseller told me, there's sob stories every day on Poshmark. You know, my grandfather died, and then my dog died, and whatever. I'm a single mom, and I can't. And she said, that stuff doesn't really bother me or affect me whatsoever, because I'm like, I didn't ask you to shop on Poshmark for the pleather purse. You don't need it. And okay, there's something going on there. But if we contrast this to the ways that people are talking about relations that matter in other kinds of secondhand exchange. So this is someone who runs a community-based thrift store, and she says once a week there's this lady, my God, she shops and shops and shops. Her daughter's disabled, so we give them little deals. I know I shouldn't do it because we're supposed to be making money to keep it going, but they don't have the money. And what I don't want to set up here is some like silly binary where we're like community reuse is really good and online reuse is really bad. But I do want to say that these relations are different, right? There's different things happening here. And so I think, though, as we seek solutions to our linear system of take, make, waste through the creation of more circular economies, it would be wise to heed the warning of James Scott, who describes, quote, the dangers of dismembering an exceptionally complex and poorly understood set of relations and processes in order to isolate a single element of instrumental value. So the sole focus of these platform economies on materials, the environmental and monetary benefits of reselling, ignores the complex economies that are already in place and that are generative of all sorts of value. And so we could look at this same network map and scale it differently. So right now, instead of looking at the size of the circles around money, or having them all be equally sized, we can size them on betweenness centrality that measures the number of times a node lies on the shortest path between other nodes. And this measure shows which nodes are bridges between nodes in a network. It does this by identifying all the shortest paths and then counting how many times each node falls on one. And when we look at things like this, we start to see a different picture of kind of what matters in secondhand networks, right? So here we see things like community events, individuals, localized thrift stores, those dark blue dots. We still see digital exchange platforms, but it's quite small, huh? And so we think about different relationships that matter here. So we can think about scale in a couple of different ways, right? We can think about growing the number of materials that we're circulating, or we can think about growing the number of relations. So my big takeaway here is just that reuse is not reuse, right? All forms of reuse are not the same. And that when we scale up secondhand economies, we're making choices about what kinds of relationships matter. And I didn't talk about the nearly decade of research that this is based on, but we have a lot of data about the already existing circular economies that are right here in our backyards. So how do we think about scale as we think about those different kinds of economies that are already here? Okay, and I promised I would end on time, and I did. So I would love questions and thoughts. Yeah, I see you.
Did Coachtopia, did anyone ever mention that Coachtopia is the re-engineered used Coach bags? It's not brand new.
No, it's not brand new. And people were talking about that. But you were mentioning too about how many things on these platforms are new with tags. So this is not the only mention of things that are new being circulated on this platform. So those Coachtopia bags that were given away were certainly new to these mostly women in this space. But the number of people that are sourcing from pallets, from retail arbitrage, from returns on Amazon, like that moment suggested to me that there are different values at play in these spaces. And some people were excited about the sustainable aspects of these free bags. But I would say more people were excited at the idea that it was a new bag, that it had tags on it, right? Yeah. Yeah. I know, I see you, yes.
Okay. So when we talk about scale, we always think of it in terms of efficiency. Mm-hmm. And efficiency, right, we want to make it cost less, like economies of scale. And so I'm wondering, though, within circular economy, there's this difference between efficiency and effectiveness. And I'm wondering if you have thought about, I'm kind of also thinking in my own mind right now.
Totally.
About the differences in those resale places, whether it be online or local. Is there a difference when we think about scale in efficiency versus effectiveness as we're scaling those different resale platforms?
Yeah. So I haven't thought about it in terms of efficiency and effectiveness. So it's interesting. I have been thinking a lot with the idea of friction, right? Like the platforms are really trying to reduce the friction associated with any individual purchase, making it really, really, really easy to buy stuff. And so this is all part of a book project that I'm thinking about on trying to pull together this stuff from rural secondhand markets as well as this participant observation and ethnographic work with online resale markets. And I think a lot about like what precisely we're getting rid of when we get rid of that friction. And so in these interpersonal, like community-based markets, it's not all sunshine and roses, right? Like there are people who don't think that certain groups of people deserve access to goods, that they're not worthy enough of them. Some people get preferential treatment and others don't. There is some tremendous infighting and sniping going on in localized exchange markets. But I do think that the friction in these markets is generative of something, right? And sometimes it's tension and sometimes it's this positive sociality. So I guess it depends on what we think effectiveness is. If it's moving more goods, then we would do one thing. And if effectiveness is supporting our communities and building social relations between people, we would do something different.
Unfortunately, we're going to have to stop
No, it's
here.
okay. We all have
But
to end sometime. Thank you.